On the Sunday after Easter, our clergy followed a directive from our bishop, a clergy to change our Holy Scriptures, a directive to encourage us to change centuries of persecution of a particular group of people. A phrase that has been used to marginalize, to persecute, to incite violence, and to promote anti-Semitism. The phrase, the Jews. In our text, it usually reads, the disciples were locked in a room for fear of the Jews. And Bishop Sutton, after many years, has decided to right the wrong and is encouraging clergy and congregations in his diocese and around the world to change that to religious authorities, to not marginalize one group, but to name those individuals that were the ones that the disciples were afraid of. But that does not explain why the religious authorities were frightened. They themselves were in this context where they were oppressed by the Romans. If they didn't keep order, they would not themselves have power. So, where does that leave us today? Where does that leave us in society? And where does that leave Bishop Sutton, who gave that charge to us months ago, before we even knew what was going to happen on our streets, in our diocese? And we've heard it in the headlines. People lock themselves in their homes for fear of the youths. Youths ran away from the police in fear of being roughed up. The police brought in reinforcements and riot gear in fear of retaliation. This is part of the larger context we find ourselves today. And in our society, we lock up some of our black brothers and sisters because of our fear of losing control. Fear for ourselves, fear for our communities, fear for the wider world. Fear unto all of our scriptures today. And I wish it was just as easy as it appears in the scriptures. Love conquers fear. But the hardest thing is to really admit that we are fearful. To really admit what we are afraid of. Here in Annapolis, we can almost lock away what is happening in Baltimore. It's not here, it's there. But then we're just doing the same. We are marginalizing, we are categorizing without changing. The gospel talks about pruning, about attaching ourselves to the vine. If we're willing to attach ourselves to the vine of Christ, it's asking us to be willing to acknowledge our filthfulness and willing to unlock ourselves to God and allow the Holy Spirit in and let those fearful places be snipped away and the Holy Spirit in and love to fill us. Then what will occur? Can we take those steps? Can we take those steps to build relationships? Can we take those steps to hear the stories? Can we take those steps to understand the context of how we got to this place? these are going to be small steps in a long story. But just as Bishop Sutherland said, changing the word the Jews to religious authorities can have a huge effect. By us actually admitting what we are fearful of, whether it is black youths, whether it is any kind of youth with a hoodie up, whether it is just, I don't want to not lock my house up anymore. Like, what is it that we are fearful of? There is legitimate fear, and then there's fear that society has kind of embellished. God is saying, let fear go and peace in. Can we prune our prejudices out of ourselves? Can we even admit our prejudices? What are we doing here? How are we making those first steps? Are we listening? Are we willing even to try and make a system change? It was interesting the difference between going up to Baltimore on Tuesday night to an event that was spontaneous and had a few hundred youths present, and hearing their stories of how they have textbooks that are from the 1970s and outdated computers that aren't updated, and actually hearing the stories of the youths and hardly any police presence, to Diana's reflection of last night in Annapolis, where hardly any youths turned up, even though it was touted as an event to hear the youths of Annapolis talk, but it was full of police. And the religious leaders and authorities from Annapolis said, why aren't the youth here? And the few youths that were there said, well, why are all the police here? And the police said, well, we're here to protect all the religious leaders and all the other authorities. And the youth said, well, we're not going to come if there's all the police here. We have to break the cycle. We have to make that first step. Philip in the gospel took that first step. The in the wilderness road was not slipped in as a second thought. He took that first step. Going to parts of Annapolis that you're not comfortable is a first step. To drive up to Baltimore is a first step. To have conversations with somebody you don't know is a first step. To actually acknowledge you are fearful is a first step. And then allow the Holy Spirit to do some pruning of your fearfulness and allow God's Spirit in. Because what would happen if each one of us allowed more of God's peace in our hearts and changed just a little bit? What if the people in the locked homes could feel Christ's presence and the words, peace be with you? What if those running on the streets could feel Christ's presence and hear the words, peace be with you? What if those scared police officers on the front lines, wondering if they're going to get a rock thrown at them, could feel Christ's presence and hear the words, peace be with you? What if we would allow Christ's presence within ourselves and we'll hear the words, peace be with you? And what if the prisoners we have had a part in locking up could feel Christ's presence and hear the words, peace be with you? What if?